The South China Sea is one of the most hotly contested waters in the world. But when international media talks about it, the story often feels one-sided.
We've just been rammed by a Chinese boat.
China is pushing for dominance.
But is the story really that simple? Who crafts these narratives, and what impact are they having on the region? Let's start with some of the headlines.
So if you will look at the narrative in the Philippines, there is a very strong anti-China messaging because of China's activities in the South China Sea.
You'll notice a pattern in the coverage of these maritime confrontations. In many media outlets, China plays the role of the aggressor, and countries like the Philippines are the brave underdog.
This anti-China messaging is in fact heavily influenced by Western perspective of pushing back against China. And this Western perspective aims to highlight China's behavior in the South China Sea as aggressive and coercive. The story of David versus Goliath is another Western perspective to describe the situation.
Scholar Hong Nong says the Philippines is not a passive actor in this conflict. Rather, it has actively sought to provoke China in ways that are likely to elicit a strong response. China sees its actions as defending its territorial sovereignty and maritime rights, yet this version is usually left out.
There is a huge disparity in strength between China and Southeast Asian countries. Based on this logic, and viewing China through an ideological lens, they conclude that China's actions in the South China Sea are not for rights protection, but for bullying.
Sometimes the labels are subtle. For example, nicknaming China's Coast Guard ship as the monster ship, not because it attacked anyone, but because it's big.
The Chinese vessel has a displacement of more than 10,000 tons, while the Philippine and Vietnamese vessels are only a few hundred tons. That's why they call it the monster ship.
But here's the irony. The U.S. sends in aircraft carriers, actual floating fortresses, yet no one calls them monsters. So who is making the labels and why?
These labels are carefully fabricated by the United States. It's a smear campaign based on their deliberate distortion of China's maritime rights protection activities. Labeling is a simple and highly effective campaign, but no one pays attention to whether the story behind these labels is true or false.
While the headlines escalate the drama, here's what's actually happening in the region.
China and Indonesia signed an intergovernmental document on maritime joint development. China and Malaysia launched a bilateral dialogue on the management of maritime issues. China has established maritime dialogue mechanisms with all countries concerned.
In April, Beijing hosted the first ministerial meeting of the China-Indonesia Joint Foreign and Defense Ministerial Dialogue. The two sides agreed to enhance cooperation in fields including maritime security. It's a framework fundamentally different from the U.S.-led narrative.
In my understanding of China's approach with the members of the littoral state in the South China Sea, China considers these countries not as small states, but a fellow developing nations with the same aspiration for common development, the same aspiration for the prosperity of their people.
So why do these cooperative moves rarely trend? Experts say the U.S. and the Philippines is waging narrative warfare against China, resulting in more confusion and antagonism.
It has turned the South China Sea into one filled with false narratives. So the international community's understanding of the disputes is in a state of confusion, and nationalistic sentiments in various countries are also on the rise.
So what is the way forward? Many are calling for a renewed focus on peace and dialogue and for the sides to find common ground.
In ASEAN, the narrative when it comes to the South China Sea is highlighting the value of peaceful settlement of disputes and highlighting the importance of pursuing cooperation and the need to set aside conflicts in order to develop friendship and understanding with China.
The South China Sea could be the source of a dangerous open conflict, or it could be a model for regional cooperation. The difference between the two may lie in how we tell the story. Chen Yuan, CGTN, Beijing.